Hi, everyone. We are so glad you decided to join us for this educational workshop. My name is Lynn Poland, and I am the co-founder of Kindred Beginnings, a family building support community offering a safe, brave space for those navigating the journey to be supported, heard, and validated. If you have any questions about our programs or how we can better support you, please reach out to me or visit our website. So thank you so much for making time and space to sit with some of the harder parts of this journey, like all the anxieties and fear. The thing is that infertility is trauma. And what does it mean to honor the trauma, and what can you do to push through and feel centered and grounded in your next steps? So today, let's uncover ways to integrate your experience as a part of your story, but not what defines you, and help you to find tools for the healing toolbox. You will be guided through a few grounding activities today that you can add to your toolbox to stay present, grounded, and in a supported, safe space on this journey. Please allow me to introduce Melissa Lucchesi. Melissa is a mindful, trauma-informed doula for fertility, prenatal, birth, postpartum, and lactation at Moon Sage Mama LLC. She is a trauma educator and former trauma counselor who is passionate about bringing safe and supportive care to all of her clients, regardless of shared trauma history, birth, or fertility trauma. Her goal is to help clients manage fears and anxieties, in the process, stay grounded and well, and feel truly seen and heard as they delve into whatever is their next step on the parenting path. So welcome, Melissa. Thank you so much for bringing this front and center so we can feel more supported and grounded in our journey.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I love talking about this stuff, and I love giving people a little bit of background about and naming what they might be experiencing, and then giving them some things to help them through some hands-on activities. So hopefully we could do that today.
Absolutely, a name it to tame it kind of thing, for sure.
Yes. So I named this workshop Butterfly Emerging, and it seemed like the most appropriate title, I think, to give this workshop. Years ago, I was asked to write a chapter in a professional trauma textbook, and I wrote about my own trauma experience, and I entitled it Butterfly Emerging. And I like that imagery, and I use it a lot when I'm talking about trauma because of the whole idea of that a butterfly coming out of a cocoon, and how painful of an experience it is, but how if you were to help the caterpillar out, if you were to open it itself and it wasn't going through that painful nitty gritty stuff, it wouldn't survive. And how some of our own wounds, our biggest traumas, can feel so painful, and moving through the healing process is truly a painful journey, but it's necessary sometimes for us to really delve into that healing so that we can come out on the other side. So that's why you see a lot of that imagery. I often use that butterfly imagery when I'm talking about all types of trauma.
Yeah, and I love what you said about how if we were to help that caterpillar, the caterpillar wouldn't survive. And sometimes when we're in the midst of it, I feel like we don't quite understand why. We just want to know why. And sometimes when you do kind of come out the other side, or come out a little bit further, and you look back and you say, okay, now I understand. Right? Do you find that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's difficult to see the light when you're really, really immersed in the dark, but then you'll see like it peeking out here and there and here and there. And then once all of that darkness is behind you, I find that you're kind of looking in on it, and you can be totally in awe of yourself with what you've been through and how it has shaped you.
Yeah.
So how do I switch slides is the question.
You should be able to just, there you go.
So in this workshop, we're going to go over an overview of the trauma spectrum, how trauma affects people, which, spoiler alert, it's a very individual thing. Integrating trauma narrative, so how to make this a part of your story, but not your entire story. Finding healing space and grace. We're going to do a couple of hands-on activities that you can hopefully take with you through this process to ground, center, and breathe, and talk a little bit about finding support and what that looks like. So this is me. I have been in the trauma field forever and ever and ever. And it really, I can't even remember a time that I wasn't in the trauma field. I have my bachelor's in psychology. I was a trauma counselor and educator for over 17 years and still continue to do a lot of trauma education with doctors and nurses, doulas, lactation professionals, trying to help people to understand how to be trauma informed in the work that they do so that people who have been hurt are supported and people aren't re-traumatized going through fertility, prenatal care, birth, and all of these things. I helped to write the Campus Sexual Assault Victims Bill of Rights and did a lot of work on Capitol Hill with things like that. I worked in campus sexual violence on a national level and trained on a national scale as well. I'm the co-founder of Trauma Informed Lens Yoga, which teaches yoga instructors to be trauma informed in all of their public classes. And I am a mindful trauma informed doula, fertility through postpartum at Moonstage Mama LLC. I am mama to a little boy named Gray, who's in the other room doing virtual school. Fingers crossed for quiet, uneventful half an hour here. And I myself am a sexual violence survivor, and I speak a lot about that and my own personal journey through healing, which I'll probably touch upon at certain points during this presentation, because it has shaped a lot of what I do and why I do the work that I do. So I talk a lot about my post-traumatic growth, which we'll talk about too.
Oh, so I love post-traumatic growth. I talk about that all the time.
It doesn't have to be like this, devastating sentence that you can totally, I'm as painful as the trauma was and is, I'm grateful for pieces of it because I know I wouldn't be where I am and who I am without it. So
yeah. So for anybody that is listening to this talk and doesn't know what post-traumatic growth is, I would say it's when you've gone through a trauma and you actually have become a better person because of it. Because you've learned things. So for me, for example, I was in education for 18 years and now I have switched careers and I have done this and I am now an active I meditate and I do yoga and I do gratitudes. I never did any of that before. So I've become a better, more well-rounded person because of my fertility journey.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. I will also mention my dog is going to pop up on.
We love for babies. We love for babies. Totally fine.
Okay. So trauma is a tricky thing, and it can be very clinical in what it looks like when you on like a professional level, but it's something that's so uniquely personal to each person. And there she is. And some people will experience something and feel highly traumatized by it. And someone can experience the same thing and not feel as traumatized. I want you to leave with, when we're talking about trauma, is whatever you define your trauma as, it's valid. So I have on this slide the very clinical criteria of an individual who experiences directly something traumatic or witnesses a traumatic event. There's a fear of your life or a loved one's life being threatened, repeat exposure firsthand to violence or to things that are extreme, and then re-experiencing all of these things. So this is like the PTSD type of stuff when we talk about trauma. What I really prefer is this Corey quote. On a very simple level, a traumatic event is anything that overwhelms our capacity to cope and respond. It leaves us feeling helpless, hopeless, and out of control. When we think about trauma, we usually think about the really big ones, but trauma lives on a spectrum. We are shaped by the big ones and the little ones. When we don't have the tools and resources to deal with traumatic events, they impact our physiology. They impact our bodies. When we're not able to get ourselves to safety or to say what we need to say, traumatic energy gets stuck in the body. I really like that because it touches upon this idea of trauma being a somatic experience, something that might happen to us, but lives within our body, not just in our minds. So it can be triggered through things like through our body as well. So I prefer that for when we talk about trauma, as opposed to like this very clinical way to talk about it.
And I love, Melissa, that you're saying it's highly personal. So what might be deemed as traumatic for one person may not for another. So there's no need to compare. And I also, in that quote, wanted to pull out our capacity to cope and respond. We can surround ourselves with the proper supports and talks like this to educate ourselves, to lift us up, and to put us on that path to healing, which I know that you're going to talk about, right? But I love that part was in there as well.
Yeah. And then it goes into this whole idea of this spectrum of trauma. So in the trauma field, we talk a lot about the big T's and the little T's, but somebody's big T's might be little T's and somebody's little T's might be big T's. So when we think about trauma, we often think about rape, sexual assault, domestic violence, child abuse, neglect, that kind of stuff. We don't necessarily think about things like a dog attacking you when you're young. But if that's something that still lives within you and you still remember it and you're still going through, you still go through feeling like, oh gosh, like I still remember that and it's still super upsetting to me, then that is considered a trauma. And what we don't, I have this whole list here of just a bunch of different things. And we don't talk about birth trauma and fertility trauma, especially. We don't talk about it as a trauma. And I remember the first time that I had named fertility trauma, and the first time that somebody said to me, when you said that, it really touched me, because I realized, oh my gosh, that's what I went through. And it hadn't been talked about like that. It was just like, oh, this is something that you're dealing with. But for her, she was so greatly impacted by her long fertility journey, that she was so grateful that it was being named as what she felt it was, but kind of felt weird to name it that way. So naming it is a huge, huge step, I think, for a lot of people.
Just validating it. And so when we ask ourselves, why is infertility or family building struggles not seen as a trauma? And it's not seen as a trauma sometimes by us, the patients, like in the situation that you just mentioned, Melissa, by our friends and our family, by our coworkers, by society. And we always ask why. And but what do you think? Why is it? And then I'll tell you what I think, and I'm pretty sure we'll match up.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of reasons. I think it's an uncomfortable thing sometimes. People think it's a super personal thing. It's too personal to talk about. So then we're just not going to talk about it at all. I think sometimes people think that, and especially if there eventually is a healthy pregnancy and baby, it's like, oh, well, now you have this, so that shouldn't matter. You went through that, but look what you have now. So there's a lot of like under the rug brushing that kind of happens.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really good point. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point too, because once you conceive, it just doesn't end, because that's kind of when you're when you're in your journey and you haven't conceived yet. It's kind of like, I just need to conceive and then I'll be okay. Well, then like a whole other like layer of things happen, and then it's like, I just need to give birth and I'll be okay. And it just kind of snowballs effects, and it doesn't ever really go away. You still need to be able to handle the after effects of your journey. And I agree with you. I think it's because it's kept private, and that's why we need to have more talks like this. We have to have National Infertility Awareness Week every week. We need to be open about it. It needs to be a conversation that's had as commonly as when we talk about breast cancer. right? Or we talk about other kinds of diseases. So yeah, I agree with you. We need to
And
shatter the stigma and shame, as I say.
yeah, and that trauma is this whole spectrum. It's uncomfortable to talk about. I've working, primarily in the sexual violence field my whole life. It's people don't want to talk about it. We don't want to hear about it. We don't want to think about those things. But it's reality. All of these things are reality for someone and for many people. So when we start talking about it more, yeah, it might make people shift in their chair. It might make people uncomfortable. But that's a good discomfort, because you need to shake things up to get it out. And when somebody, and we'll talk about this too, it's nobody's job after experiencing trauma to go and to talk about it and change the world. But if you do feel comfortable and like you want to talk about it, being empowered to talk about it is a part of the change, where we'll actually start shifting this whole, the whole way that we look at fertility and we look at infertility and this journey and the trauma that comes along with it.
Yeah.
So this is also something so if some people may want to name what they've been through as trauma, other people may not. Other people may feel uncomfortable talking about things as that they've been through as trauma, and that's fine. I never make the assumption that somebody wants to name something as a trauma, and I just allow the space for them to define that on their own. How trauma affects people is also super individual. But some of the more common things are those intrusive thoughts. So, going through this process and then remembering things that happened before, remembering a really difficult procedure, remembering loss, and having all of these things triggered. It could be triggered by like a known trigger, where it's like, okay, I'm going through, I have a positive pregnancy test, but what's being triggered right now is all of the negative pregnancy tests, or all of the procedures that I had to go through to get here, or a difficult loss, and that's being triggered. And then sometimes you don't know. You're kind of walking around experiencing some of this stuff and not really able to name exactly what triggered it. There might be a numbing feeling where you're not feeling as, you're not experiencing feelings at the degree that you did before. You might have a loss of interest in things. You might just want to, hunker down and stay in and not see people. You might not be able to concentrate. So trauma-induced ADD is an actual thing. So it was a thing that I was diagnosed with years ago by my doctor. And it's something that, you're not able to concentrate on what's in front of you, because everything up here is like spinning and you're thinking about a lot of the other things, all of the trauma that's living in your brain and your body. You might experience dissociation, which I like to talk about because we're going to touch upon this in a different, through a different lens in a bit. But dissociation can be where you almost feel like you're out of your body. So you could be having, let's say you're in your doctor's office, you're having a procedure done, and you almost can see yourself on that table. You're not experiencing the world from here, you're experiencing it from a different angle. It's almost like you kind of like step out of your body for a second to preserve yourself and to protect yourself from the heavy feelings that you might feel. You might be emotionally overwhelmed. You might have symptoms like headache or pressure in your head, or your eye strain. You might feel it in your body. And then it might go into other some other things like eating disorder, substance abuse, or other things that to numb what you're feeling, or to step away from what you're feeling. You might have memories of things, or you might actually get through a year and be like, I barely even remember this year. I barely even remember anything that happened. So there's a range in how people, how trauma affects people and how they experience it. And none of it is wrong. And none of it is right. So we have an image of what somebody looks like when they're dealing with trauma, and it's not always that way. So how you are handling trauma is exactly the way that you're handling trauma, and that's the important thing.
Again, very individual, and it's okay.
Yeah, and it's all normal. It might be uncomfortable. It might be something that you're dealing with that's really upsetting and that you want to address, but it's all normal. So trauma is a mind, body, spirit thing, and we think about it often. And I think just in society in general, we think about it as a mind thing. We think, go to counseling, talk it out. That's going to help you. But it absolutely can. And I value counseling. I value therapy. I value support groups, counseling, talk support groups. But trauma lives in your entire body and on your spirit. So even if you're addressing just your mind and your emotions, there's still trauma that's living within you. And if trauma is mind, body, spirit, healing then has to be mind, body, spirit. So when we're triggered by something, when we're dealing with trauma, what happens is in the front of our brain shuts down. We can feel really overwhelmed and then compelled to do something. The middle of our brain, or the limbic system here, it starts to get really fired up. And it actually starts sending off alarm bells like we're in danger or we're experiencing what we did before right now. So our mind's working in a way that we can't really separate our past from what we're dealing with in the remembering portion. And then we might actually start to experience in our reptilian portion of our brain, this part that says, oh my gosh, I got it. My heart rate's up. I'm breathing. I'm having that panicked, quick breathing. You might feel clammy hands. You might sweat. Your muscles are tensing up, and you're either ready to do that flight, or you might freeze and just shut down and feel like, I can't move. I can't get out of bed, or I can't get off the couch. All of this stuff is going on inside, but I feel like I can't even move. So all of this is actually happening. This is like a biological thing that's happening within us. And it can be really, really crazy making. It could feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's happening to me. I know that I'm safe. I know that this is a different situation. I know that this is a different time, but it still feels like that really, really traumatic time. And then, so if trauma is somatic and mind, body, spirit, then healing must be mind, body, spirit. I really love this little step-by-step on dealing with pain and trauma. One, you must let the pain visit. So let it come in, experience it, think about it, have your feelings about it. Two, you must allow it to teach you. So what are you going to walk away from? What can you, in this situation, take with you so that in this situation, you have more tools and you have more knowledge about yourself and your personal journey. And then three, which is my favorite, you must not allow it to overstay. And I think I'm guilty of this, allowing it to overstay and allowing trauma to define who I was for a really long time, and letting it steer the ship when I really needed to take charge and say, no, you can stay on the ship, but I'm steering the ship. It's time for you to move aside. And I hope that when we talk about integrating trauma, that you can take this and say, you know what, I'm going to take inventory on how much space trauma has within me and my life, and everything that I've been through. And I'm going to see if I could just kind of balance it out and tell it when it's time to go, and when it's time for me to step into a different role.
Take back control is what I'm hearing you say. And I love, Melissa, like one big aha already for me is, if trauma is mind, body, and spirit, that healing must be mind, body, and spirit too. I just think that that's so, it makes so much sense, but when it's put that way, it just feels so empowering. Like we do have the power to heal in our mind and body and spirit. I know we're going to talk a little bit about that, but
yeah, because it can feel really overwhelming. And sometimes when you start to name it, like, yes, it's really, I've been saying it's important to name it. It's important to talk about it. But sometimes when you're like, okay, I'm going to delve into this healing journey, it can feel super overwhelming, and stuff comes up and that maybe was you pushed down, and then it's all up here, and you're like, my God, why did I start this? Why did I start looking into this? I should have just kept it down here. But bringing it up and out is the only way to the other side, where you can experience, that post-traumatic growth and that light.
Absolutely. Yep. I always say, feel the feels. We have to sit with the hard feelings. We can't push by them. We have to push through them.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. So integrating your trauma is a really big step, and this could be a whole thing on its own. And but some of the key points on what that means is, so I've done, when I do trainings with professionals, trauma-informed trainings, trying to get them to understand what it's like coming through trauma, I do this crumpled paper activity with them, and I'll have them hold the paper and look at the paper and then crumple it up into a ball. And then I say, oh, yeah.
I know where you're going with this. Yep.
And I say, okay, open it up and make it like it was before. So I want to see that paper look like, like this. And they do that. And when I do this with like high schoolers, or they're really trying on their desk to get it, they think it's like it's a competition. But the point is, you can't make it like it was, right? So that's really what happens with trauma. You can't, even no matter what, you could be far beyond it. You could be 20, 30, 50 years beyond it. It still impacts your life to some degree, no matter what level of healing you've done. And it's still, you can't go back to the way you were before what you went through. You can't just erase that. But what I do when I'm doing work with trauma survivors, or people that have dealt with various types of trauma, is I'll have them do that paper activity, but then we create something really beautiful, like some sort of like like a Mod Podge like picture with the crumpled paper, to talk about how you can have this really amazing, beautiful life and be even like cooler than that flat piece of paper, and live this, really, really awesome life post-trauma, once you've delved into your healing. So your experiences and your trauma shape your world. You'll never be the same. You'll never be the same person as before you went through infertility. You won't be. You can't be that same person. Your experiences and your trauma also, they do not define you. So while you might say, maybe you say, I'm a infertility survivor. Maybe, you feel really, really confident in identifying yourself that way. Or maybe you say, I've dealt with infertility, or I am dealing with infertility, or I've dealt with loss, or, I'm dealing with loss, or whatever it is. This is a piece of your narrative, but it doesn't define all of who you are. And it's really easy to get lost in, once you've identified it, or once you've connected with your people, your community, the people that you feel safe with, to really identify that way. But so allowing for space in your narrative, but don't allow it to take up all of who you are. And that's harder than you would think once you start to really find healing. Helping helps. So one of the greatest things that I found in my own personal healing was helping other people. And I started a nonprofit to help survivors, which I ran for 9 years. And we did a lot of that. We did like art projects and yoga and meditation, and we healed together. And it was nice to help other people. Talking about it helps. I share my story often on college campuses, but I've shared my survivorship story, and it really feels, it gets it out. It gets it, out of here. And I feel like it has the power to help other people. So it does that helping helps thing. But also realizing that you don't need to save the world just because you've been through something and maybe you've come out on the other side, or maybe you're really handling things in a healthful way and you're feeling like, wow, I've been through so much, and I feel like I can help so many people. You don't have to. And there's a part of it too that I think I've only realized this year. I've been a sexual violence survivor for a very, very, very long time, for the majority of my life. And I had a very big trauma 14 years ago. And just on this particular anniversary of my trauma in April, I said to myself, you don't have to save the world. Like you don't, just because you went through what you did doesn't mean that you have to give yourself away all the time. And I think it's a really good reminder. I had a lot of people, when I shared that on my personal social media, saying, thank you for that reminder. Because I think we do feel like when we've been through something difficult, that now it's our job to be the voice for that thing. And I hope that you don't feel that you have to be. It helps to help, and it can be a really, really great to connect with others, but it's not your job now to be the voice for infertility journey or the voice for any trauma that you've been through.
I think that's so important, Melissa, because what you're saying is help and set boundaries for yourself. It needs to be a good balance.
So some of the things that we can do, scoot back for a second. So we're going to go into some of the other like hands-on tools for our toolbox. A couple different activities that you can take with you, whether you're going through a fertility procedure, or if you're at home and you're experiencing a lot of anxiety. This is stuff that you can literally do in almost any scenario, which is what I love, because you never know when trauma is going to creep up. This is stuff that I do with clients when I'm working with people who've dealt with trauma, or who I tend to have clients who have higher anxiety for either a trauma history or for a number of other reasons. And we work really hard in the moment to stop and to find the tool in the toolbox that's going to work this time, to keep you really grounded and present, and to keep you feeling like you can move through your day. So we'll be working on a couple of my favorites. So we'll start with this one. So breath is, obviously it's an important thing to breathe, but it's something that when we're mindful of it, the way that we're breathing, it can help to either amp you up or bring you down. So if you're in a situation where you are breathing through your mouth and it's quick, that's panicked breathing. Sometimes people will find themselves in not even, aware of it, but if they stop themselves at some point during the day, that they are breathing that way, short, quick, through their mouth. So in and out through the mouth. What that does is that triggers all of the stuff inside to get everything amped up. So I was finding that I was having a lot of anxiety when I was running. And I was like, what in the world is this? Like, it was supposed to be like this time for myself where I was just out, running. And I was like coming back feeling like garbage. And, on my run, feeling like super triggered. And I was like, this is really weird. And I had a trauma yoga counselor ask me to pay attention to my breath. And I was breathing through my mouth. And she's like, well, that's how you breathe during difficult things. That's how you breathe during a traumatic incident. So of course it's going to be triggering. So a calming breath is breathing in through your nose, a long inhale. So I'll often say to people, give yourself the oxygen, give yourself the breath, long inhale, and then an extra long exhale. So longer than the inhale, the exhale out your mouth. So you breathe in and then out your mouth. Breathe in your nose and out your mouth. And one more, in your nose and out your mouth. Sometimes with a client, when we exhale, I'll do this to remind them to go slow, 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 slow in the exhale. When you do that, it just calms you down. So you're taking all of that stuff that's feeling like buzzy inside, and you're just calming yourself and paying attention to how you're breathing, stopping yourself a couple points during the day, setting a little timer a couple times during the day to pop up on your phone that says, check your breathing. How are you breathing? Become really mindful of that. When we breathe in and out of our mouth, or when we breathe like that, where we're exhaling out of our mouth, it's a cooling breath. And if we breathe just in our nose, it heats things up inside. So you want to take that temperature down too, and make sure you're not getting all hot and up here, and you're taking everything down. So in your nose, long exhale, out your mouth. You can also do things where you do more focused breaths. So you can do something like take a deep inhale in your nose for a count of 5, and then so we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold for 1, 2, 3, and exhale 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then do that again. So you can do imagery with your breathing too, if that's helpful. Some people find that focusing heavily on imagery or count, like that type of counting while breathing, some people find that to actually be a little bit more triggering, and when you're focused that heavily on your breathing, it can feel really overwhelming. So I tend to just do that inhale and then that long exhale. So reminders of long exhale, as opposed to, the more focused stuff. Other people are, they want to sit down and actually do like a meditation. There's tons of stuff on YouTube that you can pull up if you want something a little bit more formal. But I tend to like the informal stuff because, like I said, like if you're in your work day and you're in your office and you're feeling like panicky, you can go to the bathroom, you could sit in the stall and you could just take, a couple breaths, or you could do it at your desk. It's something that you can do anywhere.
Breath is accessible anywhere, anytime.
Yes. And all of these things I feel like too, especially, when the weather is nicer, if you do it outside, it like amps up the healing even more. So if you can, on your work day, just say, oh, you know what, I'm going to just step outside and take a couple deep breaths and remind myself that I'm safe, I'm well, all is well. I love mantras like that. All is well, all is well. And you're really convincing yourself, everything's okay. I'm safe, all is well.
My yoga mentor says, lots of love in, lots of love out.
I love that.
Yeah.
Or you could breathe in what you want to bring in and breathe out all the stuff that you want out. So, breathe in peace, exhale, drama, exhale,
whatever
anxiety,
it is,
fear,
get it out.
Whatever it is. Physical grounding is just what it says it is. It's actually, grounding yourself into the earth, but also grounding yourself into your body. So like when we talked about that dissociation, it doesn't even have to be like clinical dissociation that you're going through, but it could just feel like, we've all experienced something like where we've driven somewhere and maybe our mind starts going, or we remember something, and then we get to where we're going, even if, if we've driven there 100 times and we can't really remember what the way we got there. That's a super common form of dissociation. So it doesn't have to be like this big clinical thing to dissociate, but it can be something like that, where it's just like, oh, I don't really remember what happened today. Or I don't remember like the last, the drive here, the last couple of hours. So grounding yourself and finding ways to do that again are simple and accessible, are really important. And especially when we're going through things that are reminding of us of difficult things, or we're going through a procedure where you're going to be kind of out, feel a little bit out of your body, or not really fully present. So grounding yourself before, during, after, whenever you need to, can be super helpful. So there's one way to do it that's not as accessible, which it's called grounding or earthing. So you take off your shoes and you go stand in grass, and you just stand like, you do that tree pose, or like you ground your feet into the ground, and you take a couple of breaths and you feel yourself truly grounded. I recommend that to people a lot when they're, in their home and they're feeling like, wow, I'm feeling extra anxious today. So go out and just sit out in the grass, ground yourself into the actual earth, and feel, come back to your body, come back and be present. Obviously, that's not something that you can do all the time. If you're at work, or if you're in your car, or whatever. But what you can do is you can be mindful of the ground that you're walking on. I'll throw, like, if I'm with somebody in a doctor's office or a hospital and they're feeling really super anxious and not quite in their body, I'll throw down a towel or a sheet or whatever I could find around so that they can touch the ground and it's not so icky. And physically leaning down and touching the ground can be so helpful. Sometimes I recommend people touch the ground and then repeat the date or the day that it is, so that you you're coming back to this present moment. You're saying, oh, today, I don't even know, what is it? Monday, June 7th. It's Monday, June 7th, 2021. And you just kind of, okay, I'm here, I'm safe, I'm well. And you are grounding yourself and feeling present again. And then you could do things that reorient yourself to the space that you're in now. So we're going to do my all-time favorite, activity or grounding activity. It's called 5, 5, and 5. So what you do, and you could do it in your space now, and I'll do it in mine. So you stop, you feel yourself, you sit down or you stand, and you say, you pick 3 senses. So the ones that are most accessible we'll use today. So we'll use sight first. And I say, what are 5 things that I see in my room? I see my navy blue wall. I see a bronze yoga statue. I see a bumpy natural colored rug. I see a pink flower chair, and I see a floral coffee mug. So you just find 5 things that are around you that you could see. Then you say, what are 5 things that I can hear? So now it gets a little trickier. You have to pay more attention. I hear a car moving out front. I hear some kids on the Zoom in my son's class in the other room. I hear my paper moving in front of me. Oh, I heard my dog just knock something over. And, oh, and I hear her little paws on the upstairs on the bathroom floor. So that's 5 things that I hear. Now it gets a little trickier. What are 5 things that you feel? I feel the bumpy rug under my toes. I feel the pillow against my back. I feel my knees against one another. I feel the hair brushing on my cheek, and I feel my hand on my thigh. So it brings you back into your body, into the present moment. If you're feeling super, super anxious, you can also do taste, and you can find, you probably need to take out different things for you to taste. And then you could say, you know, I taste this lemon, or I taste this piece of chocolate. What you're doing is if you're feeling out here, you're just coming back and narrowing your focus so that you really are present in what's going on and what you're experiencing now. And if you go through those 3, it's an easy one to do if you're like sitting in the office, or if you're, you know, in a car or whatever. You can do this wherever with those 3 that we worked on. And then you just cycle through. If you're still feeling kind of, you know, in that anxious space, you just cycle back through. And what are 5 more things that I see? What are 5 more things that I hear and feel? So that's my favorite one. I find that in like an absolute panic, like if you're in a panic, it's one that just zips you right back into your body, into the moment.
And bonus if you can get out into nature.
Absolutely. And then you can, I'm like such a dork about birds. So I'm like, oh, I hear a bluebird.
Yeah.
I hear a cardinal. And then distraction is the third one. So distraction gets a really bad rap. Like you're totally distracted and you're not, you're not present. But sometimes there's this level of what I call helpful dissociation. So it's like kind of bringing yourself out of the stuff that you're going through, by taking your focus away from the stressful thing. So one of the ways I like to do this is to do finger presses with counting. And sometimes I'll do this with a client where they'll be, having a procedure done, and I'll get right in front of them and we'll do this together, and we'll count together, and we just repeat it. We repeat it. And I notice that they'll really focus in and, connect, have, eye contact with me, and we just repeat it together. So it looks like this. You're going to press your thumbs first. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you can do this like on your side. Like if somebody's talking to you and you're like super uncomfortable with what they're talking about, you just kind of want to, zip out for a second. You can press your thigh or press your leg, and nobody knows you're doing it, but you're keeping yourself grounded. You're keeping yourself present in your body, but distracted from the stressful thing.
Love it. That's a new one for me. I just wrote it down. Thank you.
I love that one, because when somebody's like right in front of you and you're like, like they're saying like real uncomfortable things, you're like, oh,
no,
gosh,
just go like this.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
We've all been there, and we will be there again for sure.
Yep. And then, so those are, 3 activities that you can, or 3 different types of things that you can put in your healing toolbox to just pull out whenever. I also put in here yoga, and I'm really mindful when I talk about this, because I don't want to ever be the person that's like, oh, just do yoga. Like, oh, you're going through a hard time, just do yoga. And I feel like I ride the line of that, because I know it can be so helpful. So I do like to talk about why it does help. And it's because it's a mind, body, spirit thing. So if trauma is a mind, body, spirit thing, and healing has to be mind, body, spirit, yoga can be really a helpful and healthful space. You're connecting in with your breath, which we learned was really important. We're also connected to our body. So it's not just like with meditation, you're connected into your breath and your mind, but this, you're moving your body. And there's space to learn to love your body again, if that's something that you've come to, be frustrated with or angry at. And I don't say, this is where you learn to love your body, but there's space to do it. So if that's a goal for you, if you want to learn like how my body can do really amazing things. My body does not just hold trauma. My body does not just hold fertility struggles. My body does not just hold loss. My body does really amazing things, and it can really bring you home into your body. And crying in yoga is totally okay. I cry like on the regular in the yoga space, and it's nobody ever looks at you funny. There's this known thing in the yoga community that when you work on your hips, you do hip openers. It's the junk drawer of your body. So when you do a hip opener, everybody's crying, or everybody's wanting to cry. So it's a space that you can really find a lot of healing and connection. I do recommend people find somebody, if possible, who is a trauma-informed yoga instructor. When I do trainings with yoga instructors, we do talk about birth trauma and fertility trauma on that trauma spectrum, and how sometimes people are touched out and don't want to be touched in the yoga space. And it's not, just people who have a sexual violence history or domestic violence history. Touch is really intimate. And sometimes people are like, you know what, hands off. And a truly trauma-informed yoga instructor is going to have some type of ask before touch, or a symbol, where they're just not going to come in and touch you. So I do highly recommend that. And people could feel free to reach out. I have people local to the Jersey, Philly, Delaware area that are trauma-informed that I can recommend, or I can recommend where to go to potentially find someone.
Yeah, and I'll take those resources and I'll definitely share those out. That's important. And if you know of other people in other places, we have people from all over the state, so you can shoot me that too.
Awesome.
The most important thing before you share your contact, Melissa, this is just my next aha. You just kept saying like, you need to learn to love your body again. I think so oftentimes when we're going through these struggles, we're just so angry with our body. Why is my body not ovulating? Why is it not working correctly? Why do I not have enough eggs? Why are they not good eggs? We're just so angry with our bodies. And so for us to shift that and reframe to my body can really do amazing things is just so empowering and important for us to be able to connect our mind, body, and spirit. Because if we keep saying my body's awful, my body can't, then that's the energy we're putting out into the universe. So to be able to shift it and learn to love your body again, so important. So important.
It's so important. And trauma happens, so often happens to our body or within our body. And it is something that, we're left with those wounds or those scars, and we're carrying around our body. It's not like we can leave it behind. It's something that we are living in. So it's such a critical step to learning to just find space to appreciate our body, and how powerful it is and how wonderful it is, and all of the things that it can do, no matter what works for you. If a yoga class works for you, or maybe it's taking walks in nature, maybe it's running a huge distance or not a huge distance, but always taking that space when you do something with your body, taking that time and giving yourself that appreciation that, wow, you know what? You did a great thing today. Even if it's just getting up out of bed and like making yourself a healthy meal, like you did a great job today, and look at how awesome you are. Look at all the things that you can do. It goes a long way.
And just give yourself, I think it even just starts with offering yourself permission to say, hey, you know what? I made myself a great breakfast today. You know what? I got outside for 5 minutes, right? You know what? I made this small shift, and just starting by offering yourself permission, and then the rest will start to unfold.
Absolutely.
Please share your information.
So I I'm a big person. I say similar things all the time, that you deserve to be seen and heard and supported. And I think it's something I feel like I say sometimes too much, but it's because people on this path are not seen, they're not heard, they're talked at and not listened to. And there is really a lack of truly mindful trauma-informed support in this space, fertility through parenting. So what I do, I am a fertility doula. So what I do in that space is I do a physical hand-holding, emotional hand-holding. I try to just be in your corner and walk through, processing out the trauma and as it happens, and as you go through the different pieces on this path. And then in the prenatal and birth space, whether you have a trauma history, a fertility trauma, or a prior birth trauma, it's really important to have trauma-informed support. I was recently, last week, was with somebody who had a significant trauma history and who was really struggling. And I realized how grateful I am to be in those spaces and to really walk through this journey with people and help people to feel grounded and supported, and loved and cared about, and just remind them repeatedly throughout this process, you're safe, you're supported, I'm here, you're not alone. So I would do everything through a mindful trauma-informed lens. That means you don't have to share any of your history, or you could share all of your history. Oftentimes when people talk to me for a consult, it's the first time they've shared really, really difficult pieces of their history, and that's fine. I'm here to hold space for you and your narrative. But even if you don't share that, or you don't feel comfortable sharing, or you don't want to share that with me, I operate the same way with everybody. I operate like you have a trauma history, because it's the safest and most supportive way for all people. So if I put my contact information up here, this is actually my cell phone, so you could feel free to reach out through my cell phone. You can go to my website to learn more about me and what I do, or connect in with my social media, and hopefully you feel like you have support, or you have an option or options for support and healing, no matter where you are on this path.
Absolutely. And I'm also going to be sending out Melissa's information to everybody that's joining us live. And if you're seeing the recording, if you go to our resources page on our KB website, Moon Sage Mama is listed under our resources, and you can link right up to Melissa there as well. Melissa, I think it's so amazing, the information that you're bringing, the validation, the permission, this last quote, you deserve to be seen, heard, and supported. And that is what you have done here for this community today, here now. And I'm so grateful and appreciative to you. And if people want to find out more about you, you can certainly reach out to Melissa. And if you are not local to the Philadelphia area, I'm sure you can still reach out to Melissa, and she can try to work with you in trying to find some resources, right, Melissa?
Yeah, absolutely. I serve all of Greater Philadelphia, Jersey, South Jersey, and Delaware, but I am connected to a lot of trauma-informed professionals across the country. So feel free to reach out, and we'll try to hook you up with somebody perfect.
Awesome, thank you. And Melissa, if there was like one last takeaway that you would want to share with everybody today, what would it be? What's one big thing you want everybody to kind of walk away with and think about and pique their curiosity about?
I guess that whatever happened to you, it doesn't define you. And it can feel like such a hopeless space when you're in it. And just reminding yourself, even if you are especially if you're in that dark space right now, knowing that it truly does get better. People say that all the time, and it sounds so, like half-hearted, but I'm saying it from the bottom of my heart, that even in the depths of despair, I assure you that it does get better, and that you're never, ever, ever alone. You don't have to do this. You don't have to walk through this path alone. There's a lot of people that are going through similar things, have gone through similar things, and there's a lot of people who have experienced that growth and are on the other side of it. And you'll be there too.
Yeah, love that. And it's offering hope for all of us. So thank you so much. Melissa, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.